clear vision for peace, just as Sadat made the historic visit to Jerusalem in 1977.
سخنران تاریخی شاهزاده رضا پهلوی در ژنو، صدای ایران در نشست حقوق بشر. امروز با ویدیوی ویژه همراه شما هستیم. سخنرانی تاریخی و پرشکوه شاهزاده رضا پهلوی در نشست سالانه حقوق بشر و دموکراسی. در این نشست مهم، شاهزاده رضا پهلوی با قدرت و ملایمت از حقوق مردم ایران، مبارزه با استبداد، آرزوی یک ایران آزاد و دموکراتیک گفت. آیا این لحظه سرآغازی برای تغییرات بزرگ خواهند بود؟ صدای مردم ایران در یکی از مهمترین مجامع جهانی طنین‌انداز. اما این سخنرانی چه پیامدهایی خواهند داشت؟ آیا جامعه جهانی به حمایت از مردم ایران برخواهند خواست؟ اگه میخواین بدونین شاهزاده رضا پهلوی چه گفت و چه واکنش‌هایی به این سخنرانی داده شد و چرا این لحظه تاریخیه، تا پایان این ویدیو همراه ما باشین. شما این سخنرانی رو چگونه ارزیابی میکنین؟ آیا میتونه نقطه عطفی برای آینده ایران باشه؟ نظرات خودتون رو توی کامنت ها با ما در میون بذارین. فراموش نکنین که کانال ما رو سابسکرایب کنین و زنگوله رو بزنین و این ویدیو رو با دوستاتون به اشتراک بذارین تا صدای ایران رو به گوش جهان برسونیم. حالا بیاین لحظه تاریخی رو با هم ببینیم.
Thank you so much. I love you too. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, and tireless advocates for human rights. Before I begin, I would like to thank the thousands of my fellow compatriots who have come from all over the world to be here today to demonstrate their love for Iran and their commitment to liberation. Being here in Geneva, the home of the United Nations Human Rights Council, makes it particularly special. I extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Noor and his team for making this conference a beacon of hope for oppressed voices worldwide. I stand here on behalf of my patriots who have for far too long been silenced, not only by the tyrannical regime that occupies our country, but by the ideological bias that distorts the truth about Iran. The story of the Islamic Republic is one of deception. This deception, coupled with their own arrogant assumptions, led leaders in the West and many in the media to portray Khomeini as a saint. They painted the revolution as one of justice and freedom. What followed was nothing short of hell on earth. Even before taking power, Khomeini's movement showed its true face. The Cinema Rex arson in Abadan killed over 400 innocent people. It was a sign of what was to come. Once in power, the regime's first targets were Iran's most capable and patriotic citizens. Military officers, business leaders, intellectuals, professionals, public servants who had built a proud and modernizing nation. I knew many of them personally. Their murders were celebrated and even encouraged in revolutionary newspapers while ignored in Western ones. Many of these men and women remain unknown to the world because they had no lobbyists or political sponsorship. Instead, they were buried in unmarked graves, and their families were denied even the dignity of mourning. But their memory endures in the heart of those who continue their fight and in the resolve of Iran's new generation. Thereafter, the regime turned its war against Iranian women. The Progressive Family Protection Law was the very first one Khomeini revoked. The mandatory hijab law imposed shortly after the revolution became a tool of subjugation, symbolizing the Islamic regime's obsession with the control over women's bodies and lives. However, from those very first days until today, Iranian women have been fighting back. But let me be clear, Iranian women are not just fighting against the forced hijab. Their struggle is not about a piece of cloth. It is about reclaiming their equality and their country. Brave women like Fatemeh Sepehri, Nasrin Shahkarami, and Nahid Shirpishe continue to resist despite imprisonment, maltreatment, and relentless persecution. Yet I see that their names remain unfamiliar to some in this room. Why? Because some human rights organizations have allowed political bias and ideological preferences to determine which voices are amplified and which are silenced. This is unethical and unacceptable. All those fighting for a secular, democratic Iran deserve recognition, regardless of their background or political affiliations. I am glad that the Geneva Summit is acting in that spirit, and I am thankful to them for hosting several of Iran's bravest protesters and their families here with us today. Thank you, Nazanin Afshinjam, for facilitating their presence, and the Geneva Summit for hosting them. Just as the Islamic Republic's repression has targeted those of all ideologies, it has targeted those of all faiths. The Baha'is have systematically persecuted, their leaders imprisoned, their cemeteries desecrated, and their youth denied education. Christians, particularly converts to Islam, live in constant fear. Like their Christian compatriots, Sunni Muslims, Jews, Sufis, Zoroastrians face rampant restriction and discrimination. The regime's institutionalized antagonism with any diversity, including religious diversity, has threatened centuries of coexistence and unity, unique to Iran. The regime's war on cultural heritage has also extended to targeting Iran's pre-Islamic history. Sites like Persepolis and Pasargad, symbols of Iran's ancient civilization, are decaying under neglect, and access to these sites is often blocked by the regime. By attempting to erase these symbols of national identity, the enemies of Iran seek to rewrite history and deprive Iranians of their rich heritage. Even the creative souls of Iran are not safe. Musicians, artists, poets, who are the very heart of Iran's culture, risk the death sentence for daring to express themselves. The Islamic Republic's war on all strata of Iranian society has targeted communities across our nation, across provincial, linguistic, and tribal lines. But despite all its attempts, it shall not divide it. We are not just fighting against the Islamic Republic, we are fighting for Iran. So let me be clear, we will never, ever allow our nation to be divided.
در این نشست شاهزاده رضا پهلوی به چالش‌های کنونی ایران پرداخته و بر لزوم احترام به حقوق بشر و دموکراسی تاکید کرد. او با صدای قوی و رسا خواستار تغییرات بنیادین کشور شد و امید رو در دل ایرانیان زنده کرد. آیا می‌دونستین که این سخنرانی بازتابی از خواسته های نسل جوان ایرانه؟ نسلی که آرزو داره در کشوری آزاد و دموکراتیک زندگی کنه. شاهزاده با شجاعت از حقوق همه ایرانیان دفاع کرد و بر لزوم اتحاد و همبستگی تاکید نمود. برای بررسی دقیق‌تر و دیدن تحلیل‌های ما تا انتهای این ویدیو همراه ما باشین.
2017 and 2019 is fighting to reclaim its stolen country. They have paid a heavy price. In November 2019, the regime massacred over 1,500 protesters, many shot at close range. Thousands were arrested, tortured, or just disappeared. Then came the Women Life Freedom Uprising in 2022, ignited by the murder of Mahsa Amini. The regime and its apologists tried to frame the movement along ethnic lines, but Mahsa's own mother called her daughter the daughter of Iran. Protesters responded by chanting, "From Hadan to Kurdistan, I give my life for Iran." This is the voice of a united nation. Despite brutal crackdowns and internet blackouts, the resistance continues. Manuchehr Bakhtiyari, who lost his son Puya in the protests, remains relentless in his fight for justice from inside his jail cell. His courage embodies the spirit of a people who refuse to be broken. But the Islamic Republic's crime does not stop at Iran's borders. The regime uses its embassies and so-called cultural centers as a base for espionage and terrorism across Europe. When it cannot reach dissidents abroad, it takes foreign citizens hostage inside Iran, holding them for ransom in a game of political blackmail. These are the crimes the world knows about. But there are many more, often overlooked, such as the regime's destruction of Iran's environment. I consider environmental justice as one of my compatriots' human rights. Decades of corruption and mismanagement have created ecological disasters that threatens millions. Lake Urumie, once the largest saltwater lake in the Middle East, has nearly vanished, triggering salt storm that devastates farms and causes respiratory illnesses. Rivers like Zayande Rud have dried up, leaving farmers without water. In Khuzestan, where water flowed for centuries, water shortages have led to repeated protests, each brutally suppressed. Air pollution in Tehran and Ahvaz is among the worst in the world, often reaching toxic levels, forcing schools and business closures. And those who dare to speak out, environmentalists like Kavuz Sayed Emami, imprisoned or murdered. Meanwhile, a country that sits on the world's second largest gas reserves experiences nationwide blackouts. Patients die in hospitals, businesses collapse, and families are left in darkness. Even the most basic of necessities, including food to eat, has become luxuries available to the privileged few. In what should be one of the world's richest countries, a growing number of my compatriots can barely afford to buy bread, let alone meat. This is all the consequences of a regime that loots and pillages rather than govern. But what is caused by the Islamic Republic can be solved by its removal. Today, we are presented with a historic opportunity. The regime is weaker than it has ever been. Its axis of resistance has been dismantled, and its domestic legitimacy has evaporated. Now is the time to act. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Therefore, at the call of my fellow Iranians, I am stepping forward to lead this movement and transition, not for myself, not for post or power, but to answer the call and do my duty as a patriot. Thank you. Thank you. My strategy for dismantling this regime and rebuilding Iran is clear. Mobilizing grassroots networks inside Iran, uniting the diaspora, pressuring G20 governments to impose maximum pressure on the regime while providing maximum support to the people, splitting the regime and encouraging defections, and preparing for political stabilization, democratic elections, and Iran's economic development and reconstruction. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you a message from a nation in chains. The Iranian people have endured more than 4 decades of suffering, yet spirit remains unbroken. They are fighting not just for themselves. They are not fighting not just for themselves, but for the values of freedom, justice, and human dignity. This is not just about my nation's survival. It is also about international stability and global peace. For as we have seen just in the last week, from terrorist attacks to hostage-taking, the Islamic Republic, despite its rhetoric in Davos and calls for a new deal, is still waging war on the free world. Until it is toppled, it will not stop. As I have traveled the continent for the past 2 weeks, I have spoken with government leaders of all parties and stripes. I know Iranians and the democratic cause has many friends in Europe, and that number is growing. But to those who seek to silence us or stand in our way, I say, we are not waiting for your green lights. The Iranian people do not ask for pity. They ask for your partnership. Our question is, will you stand with us? Thank you.
و این بود بخشی از سخنان شاهزاده رضا پهلوی که پژواک در آن در دل تاریخ و در میان ایرانیان آزادیخواه طنین انداز شد و از حقوق بشر، آزادی، دموکراسی و آینده‌ای روشن برای ایرانیان سخن گفت. آیا این لحظه سرآغاز تغییری بزرگ خواهد بود؟ آیا جهان صدای مردم ایران را خواهد شنید؟ آیا این سخنرانی ها می تواند نقطه عطفی در دل تاریخ معاصر ایران باشد؟ نظرات ارزشمندتون رو توی کامنت ها بنویسین و با ما به اشتراک بذارین. اگه از این ویدیو لذت بردین حتما کانال رو سابسکرایب کنین، زنگوله رو بزنین تا ویدیوهای جدید رو از دست ندین. همراهی شما انگیزه ماست تا ویدیوی بعدی بدرود.